Okay. Can ever can everybody hear everybody?
I'm in clean.
Hello.
Hey guys, I apologize. I won't be able. This is Josh. I won't be able to note take. I got stuck installing 436s and it's running over. So I'm on a rooftop right now, just trying to listen in.
Sure, be safe.
Hello, everybody.
What's going on, Boris?
All right, it works.
Seems like every time you jump in to start, it doesn't work, and you just have to leave and come back.
Yeah, for some reason, that's the case. Anyway, as long as it's working. All right, should we start, or should we wait a couple of minutes for more people to gather?
Yeah, I know Max is doing something too. Who else are we missing? The other Max and Daniel from the two people from Hotspotty. But I think we can go ahead and get started, Boris, if you want to. By the way, I am going to attempt to record this, so first time trying it, so 50-50 at least it works, but go ahead.
Great, good luck. All right. So, I think where we last left it, we were mostly in an okay shape to at least publish the HIP for the broader community commentary. But following that, the whole conversation about the mapper subDAO has ensued in Discord, and I do think it's generally a good idea, but also one that might take some cycles for us to think through and implement. So one side note, like when crafting the original version of the HIP, I kind of envisioned the future where indeed most of the mapping is going to be sort of like a passive activity, which I feel strongly it will end up being absent really like a dedicated mappers subDAO. And by passive, I mean it's going to be always a few people that, that will maybe actually put mappers and trunks and, seek out the places that haven't been mapped, that, have hexes that have been charged, and will actively try to like collect and optimize. But I feel that majority, at least, in the context of the Helium 5G network, majority of it's going to be like a person sets up, a spot and just like puts it in the windowsill somewhere where it continuously verifies the access point, or maybe they put it in the trunk of their car, or maybe, those folks that want to kind of industrialize the mapping would create partnerships with, Uber drivers or garbage truck companies or Hive Mapper or whatnot. But the idea was always that, like, in and of itself, active mapping of Helium 5G network is unlikely to be profitable by itself. It can only make sense if it's either attached to something that you are already doing, like, like if you're a garbage truck, you're already driving, or if you're, like a DoorDash delivery driver, you're already door dashing, and you might as well, throw in a spot in the back. But I never thought that it would be something where like people will try to like actively get rewards and change their existing behavior patterns to map.
Right.
And you guys have picked up accurately on that, in that the rewards have been structured to kind of like reflect them, right? That if we have phones eventually that are available of verification mapping, and we have mappers that are, in the garbage trucks and stuff, then it might make sense. But nobody will go out of their way to like, stand up and start like verifying other people's hotspots. And in that context, I do think the idea of the separate mapper DAO, where you could actually, so if I like, for a second, kind of put myself like out of the, take the head of like the Helium 5G specific use case where we need mappers to verify coverage, and put on the hat of like somebody who's invested in the mapper and wants to get maximum ROI. So absolutely, like having the mapper map like various hexes, collect the data about other operators, and do like basically do IoT mapping and do Wi-Fi mapping and do 5G mapping. You wanna have multiple streams of value that you ultimately aggregate, and I think that is possible to do with the separate like mapper sub-DAO. And from the standpoint of a person that's like investing in mappers and looking to maximize ROI on the mapper as the unit of hardware, it does make sense. Having said that, now like taking the mapper hat off and putting back like the hat of just the Helium 5G network, and potentially like a Helium mobile operator that is going to use the network, the near-term like requirements that we would need for mappers is like we would need them to verify the coverage. Like do like anything better than we currently have is already better, because right now we have a situation where basically people submit the CPI and we test the pictures and then we create the coverage model based on it, which by itself is a whole lot better than the first stage that we were in, where just everybody gets UBI, but we don't really do any checking. So any kind of checking or validation is going to go a long way, I think, to kind of get this modeled coverage to be more accurate and for people to be less prone to cheating. So achieving that is a first step. And obviously the discovery mapping, which I talked about before, is another important thing when it comes to the mapper's hip. So I'm trying to figure out like how do we, on one hand, like, continue making progress and satisfy what's needed for the like Helium 5G sub-DAO to get better and like, get POC more robust. But at the same time, I totally do see the need for, like a person that's investing in the mapper, you do want the maximum ROI, and the mapper already does, mapping of basically all bands across all providers. Like that functionality is already there in Spot. So kind of like not using it at all is almost weird. So the thought process then that kind of takes me is like the next steps is what do we need to do? We need to ideally make some progress on the mapper's hip. What are the ways that we can make progress? One way is we can say, okay, well, this verification mapping stuff, we need to wait for the sub-DAO, for the mapper sub-DAO to come up. Let's just do nothing. Let's punt the whole thing of how we reward mappers to the mapper sub-DAO and just have like the mapper's hip just for discovery mapping, super limited version of it. The other alternative that, as I mentioned, that I would much rather favor is to actually start collecting the data and start rewarding the mappers and get some number of spots out there now, using the more or less the model that we've discussed. And then already now maybe in the HIP we can explicitly state that we are rewarding the mappers, that there's going to be a sort of like a beta warm-up period where everybody gets a mapper, starts mapping, doesn't reward, then we start rewards using this scheme. And then we roll the rewards into the sub-DAO, which would make it actionable on the spot side as well. So that's just like a long, I've been reading, the threads and trying kind of to look at things from different perspectives, and this is my like long just brain dump on all of it. So maybe I'll just shut up for now and have other folks comment, but let's just have a conversation about this.
So if we do want to go the mapper DAO route, they're not mutually exclusive. Like we can start out with the mappers just operating and earning mobile, and then we can convert that to 20% of the mobile rewards still go towards mapper DAO, and that can be in like their treasury or however they want to do that in the future. So like I don't think we need to hold up deploying spots just because we may in the future do a mapper DAO. And then on top of that, the like what we have them do, I think we keep it as simple as possible for now. I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean that's what I think we should do, frankly.
I would concur with that.
I think that's a better path. Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah,
I mean, use the data we have.
there's-
Sorry, go ahead. Well, yeah, so just I think that makes a ton of sense to use the mappers in their current configuration. Like we've been talking about kind of dealing with the numbers specifically, but I think we do need the mappers in some capacity, at least to start this thing. At least start getting some outside of model coverage verification of what's happening, and this is the best way forward. And then just the mapper DAO I think is going to fall outside our purview though, so I don't know if it's right for us to kind of try to set boundaries or just basically word it in a way that it's not binding or permanent with the expectation it will change in the future.
Right.
Yeah, it's basically
I
what I was going to say too. Was there's some
Right.
importance in establishing the metrics so that we can at least start to getting to test the system and see what works and what doesn't work while we still have a small batch.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that one of the ways to we can explicitly add just I think that there's a lot of good thinking that went into the concept of the mapper DAO. So it would suck if it would just like die on the vine. I don't want to like punt it off to like sometime later, never. So it might make sense to, even in the current HIP, to just kind of set the expectation right away, so that people voting will know, so that later when the mapper DAO materializes, we all agree that this is going to be like the Helium 5G will be one of the first sort of customers of the mapper DAO, and some of the data that we'll collect during the current stage is going to inform exactly like how the treasuries are going to work and how the mapper DAO gets rewarded for sending what data to the Helium 5G.
Yeah, I think we
that
can even add
if we,
in. Oh, sorry.
yeah, if
I
you
think
just
we can even
frame
add
it
in a
already
piece.
now, it'll be easier later.
Yeah, and I think if we add in a piece essentially saying like we're going to incubate this mapper DAO, and in exchange for doing that, the mapper DAO will agree to charge us no more than 20% of the mobile emissions.
Yeah, something like that.
Boris, it sounds like you're asking Brainstormer, Keith, and Laser to start drafting the mapper head, huh? Or sub-DAO.
Well, I mean, to the extent that this can be done, that'd be great. Yeah, because I think that, on the Nova side, we have a lot of hips to draft. So to the extent that the community members can help with some of that work, that would be fantastic. Okay. What else is there that we should discuss? I mean, I think that other than we seem to be on the same page, and the next step is to just clean up the this doc, resolve the comments, make it into basically a Git document that we can publish for like everybody to comment on outside of the just the mobile POC working group, and you know, take it into the discussion and then hopefully eventually voting. And separately on the Mapper DAO, I think, I don't know, Keith, a brainstormer, if you guys can start putting together sort of like a draft separately for it, similar to how we've drafted just like the mappers for Helium 5G. We can probably, you know, together ask the foundation to, you know, create some framework for the community to start moving that forward in parallel.
I agree.
Where did we leave off last time? I think there was some
Do
decision.
we want to
that
just
you were-
make like a minimum viable product of essentially just mapping willy-nilly to test out the mappers first and then kind of rein it in from there? Or are we kind of wanting to incentivize people to map radios?
Well, so like the spot right now will, like just the way it works is that it'll map willy-nilly. The question is, do we use the data for anything that we like actually that gets rewarded or not? So for just capturing the data and displaying it on like an Explorer, I think it makes sense. Like it's just, you know, it's probably like less work for us to have that proceed as is versus like change. When it comes to the rewarding the willy-nilly mapping, I think that this is going to be subject to how the like Mapper DAO evolves, and what the like the system is for rewarding, right? So I would probably proceed with spots like mapping willy-nilly and verifying the hexes. Already now there's going to be rewards in the form of mobile tokens for verifying. There's going to be display of data for the willy-nilly stuff, and then when the Mappers DAO materializes, we can kick in also like, you know, some form of rewards for the willy-nilly mapping, as we call it.
It's all going to even out anyway, because I mean we're just pulling from a pool of tokens. So I think if we incentivize mapping of radios a little bit higher, but then we set a cap of maybe like 5 or 10 miles, and then like per day, and then we have that where they have to recharge, so you can't just map the same area every day. It's not going to be like people are going to go crazy with mapping things that don't matter, but I think there is some value in seeing what the spot can do kind of in the wild rather than just like surgically trying to map different radios. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we all agree kind of on the long-term plan for the mappers, but I guess the thing I'm kind of bouncing around in my head is the short-term plan in terms of, okay, they're going to get 20% of the rewards. They're going to, we're using the point system, and then the effect on the radio side is going to be it will just at least to start is just going to be verifying them. But I think that we had talked about last time about how we're going to have like a creeping model where hexes that don't have coverage in the existing map will slowly evolve and essentially update the modeled coverage. Is that where, are we still thinking that that's the way we want to progress with this with mappers?
Well, if we make the mappers map everything willy-nilly, we'll eventually see also some data on the hexes that have been mapped outside of model coverage for the CBRS cells. And while we don't necessarily need to come up with like day one the mechanism for incorporating those cells into like the set of rewardable hexes, once we have the data, we can definitely make a separate HIP and like do that, right? But if we, for example, if people walk around with the mappers and they map around the cell, right, and you've mapped a bunch of hexes, some of the hexes that you mapped are actually inside the modeled coverage, and they're like basically fall within this verification model that we discussed. And some of the hexes were maybe like directly adjacent to the modeled coverage, but we did capture that this hex has been mapped, and mapper on such and such date has registered signal strength from cell ID XYZ in this hex, and we can literally like put that data in the Explorer, and then after some time, once we can take a look at the picture and we can see, okay, well, it looks like there is a lot of adjacent hexes. Should we maybe consider augmenting the modeled coverage with those hexes, and based on that data, build a HIP that does exactly what you're describing, basically like sort of modding the modeled coverage based on the spot mapper feedback. But for now, we'll just reward the mappers for like verifying or otherwise, and we'll collect all of the data for willy-nilly, and the willy-nilly data will also incorporate into the same coverage explorer and show it. That could be an approach.
I still think we want to just reward people for collecting data. So essentially, we we want to get mappers out there too, and we don't want people considering the cost of a radio, we want people still mapping so we can figure out where the edges of MNO coverage are, even if there are no helium radios there. Because then we can build a better incentive structure for where we want radios to go if we know that there's actually a need. Because, I mean, my understanding is, Verizon doesn't really exactly know where the edge of their coverage is, and, neither does any of the MNOs. And they have their models that they run, but, they don't have someone testing the edge of their coverage all over the country. So that could help inform us on where they actually need coverage and where we could get offload. But if that's something that isn't actually feasible, Boris, you would know way better, so let me know. So that's kind of my thinking around that.
Okay.
I think it's feasible. The hesitation that I have around rewarding this coverage is that from the Helium 5G DAO standpoint, we don't have currently Verizon offloading their customers into Helium 5G. So as a Helium 5G DAO, the thing that we care about the most is basically creating coverage in places where it matters most for the near-term users of the Helium 5G network, right? Just because we know where Verizon doesn't have coverage, which at least to some extent you can get by purchasing data from companies like Foursquare, for instance, it doesn't really change anything for us, because even if, for example, we see that Verizon has gaps here and there, so people put radios there, but the Helium mobile subscribers like, we are looking to concentrate our launch in, like, Miami, San Francisco, LA, and Las Vegas, and we'll have some concentration of users there. So we need radios there so that we don't use T-Mo but use Helium 5G. Verizon, if we put radios where Verizon doesn't have coverage, there is some value in that. Maybe it will make it easier for us to progress the conversations with Verizon about offloading, but it's not like it's an imminent thing that's going to happen and immediately we'll get data in those places. We'll still have like radios. So I feel like we need to prioritize paying out mobile rewards for things that are imminently useful for the Helium 5G DAO versus just for, collecting higher level generic data that maybe we will sell to the operators later, or maybe we'll use it to attract the operators or something like this. But until there is like a clear path for us to actually effectively like monetize the data of, Verizon, T-Mobile coverage and the edges of coverage and stuff like that, which at least until the 5G, like the mapper sub-DAO happens, it isn't obvious that is gonna be there. And I don't think that like a Helium 5G sub-DAO should be paying rewards for that, because that's not what the Helium 5G sub-DAO near-term priorities are, in my view.
I agree with
yeah,
that last go ahead, Max.
Yeah, I would disagree with that, just because like Verizon could be a customer just as Helium Mobile is a customer. So having the knowledge of where other potential customers would want to use the network does have value. I get that on the near term. The mobile sub DAO has one customer right now, and it's important. I guess two customers if you count GigSky, and it's important to ensure that those customers are happy. But I think like we're just giving out some tokens. Like I don't think it's a huge cost to get some of these mappers out there mapping other places that there are no coverage. But I understand the point you're making too. I just think because we saw with Pollen how all the mappers kind of congregated in like 5 cities, and like it's great that people map all around Las Vegas or San Francisco or wherever. But I do think there is value of figuring out like what part of the interstate in Kansas needs coverage. It could have potential offload opportunities.
Well, I think that even to solve that problem, let's say we want to specifically attract Verizon by having better than anybody data about the edges of their coverage. I think that even that part, again, like I don't feel it's like the right way to approach to by just saying like map any hex, because like 99.9% of the hexes Verizon has coverage, and by just telling them that they have coverage there, we're not really telling anybody anything new. And if you map like a coverage hex in, I don't know, like downtown San Francisco and showed that every operator has relatively good coverage there, like there's no value in uncovering that information per se, because like you already know that. You can go and like buy that data. So I think that this kind of like uncovery of edge of coverage mapping, it might make sense for us to think through a little bit, like what do we reward and what do we not? Because for instance, you can oracle in to the Mapper DAO basic data that's already available around, right? So there's like high level data that's available about where T-Mo has coverage, Verizon has coverage. Like T-Mo publishes the map on their website. Then there's companies like Foursquare and a whole bunch of others that do like location data sharing, and you can buy data from them. Then with that data in mind, you can see where like the edges of coverage actually are and where the data might be iffy. And you can create areas to map out like there, and then you like adding new information versus just having like map everything. The map everything approach will only work if you're having like, basically an infinite number of mappers and you're covering the entire country, 99.9% where it doesn't matter, and also like small percentage where there's these edges. But it's only like the edges that really uncover value, in my view, in this
Right.
mapping. And you need to think about, okay, so how do we reward them for the uncovering the edges versus just mapping a generic hex that everybody knows there's already coverage there. There needs to be some mechanism that incentivizes for that if that's what we're going after.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
So-
that makes sense.
Yeah, I'd say the mapper's most productive function is telling where the edges are and telling where. I don't know if the mapper necessarily has this function or not, but whether or not it can tell if an area is congested or not. That's kind of the other, like, some people think that, you need to be in a place that has no coverage. I actually think that's actually only half of it. The other half will be in places where, like, I've seen, like, especially in some of the areas I operate in, there's lots of places where it's like, so there's 1,000 people here, and they don't have enough data backhaul to deal with it. So people's phones start lagging, slowing down, and so I think that's only really half. One side of the coin is where there's no coverage. The second part of that is where is there not enough coverage in terms of data throughput. But yeah, I think
I agree. I don't. We actually thought about this as well. I definitely think that there's a tremendous amount of value in uncovering the congestion. Having said that, I don't think that we have come up yet with a straightforward path to do that. At least from the mapper side. Can pick up congestion like from the network side, but from the mapper side, it has to be kind of maybe like anecdotally inferred, and you can't really do anything about it if you're just scanning.
Right, you'd almost have to. You'd have to
like
do a speed test during congested times. That's how you'd pick it up.
Right. So there's a considerable amount of complexity that goes into figuring out how to do that. And to do a speed test, you need to be actually a customer of T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T.
Right.
Well, couldn't you have the mapper outputting a signal that runs to a server that is picking up the signal on the other side, and then they would be able to pick up the congestion in an area based off of throughput?
I think that's all privatized. I don't think they'd let you see that.
Well, no, because trying to think of an example.
Can I back up one giant step for us? How long before you believe the spot is actually ready for prime time and to be in the hands of anyone else other than select people who have lots of radios, etc., and are willing to deal with the finickiness of the spot?
I think a month.
Wow.
Realistically.
Wow. Right now it's pretty dang finicky. So I've heard.
Well, it depends on where you draw the line, right? The line is always gray, unfortunately. So I think that we'll probably need to deal with some level of finickiness before we assume that it's okay to get some the 2,000 number of them into just people's hands, and then continuously improve it using the over-the-air updates. But I think that I'm curious to hear where do you feel is the biggest issues with the mapper right now, the finickiness of it? What have you observed?
If you're not in reach of a LoRa WAN hotspot, it dies out. So if you're in the middle of nowhere, if you're in the middle of nowhere, it craps out and stops mapping.
Yeah, it stops mapping.
I see. Well, I mean, yeah. So these are okay. So that's just like a bug that I'm pretty sure.
Sure. I'm
I don't know
not
if it's like,
suggesting. The thing's
yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's going to be. I think that it's going to be sufficiently bug-free for the first batch of enthusiasts interested in mapping to start actually mapping and producing useful data in about a month time frame. The biggest bottleneck to really getting it out in the wild, I think, is the completion of the Solana migration and the implementation of the reward scheme, which is why I've been pushing for the mapper thing, because we need to agree on the first boilerplate version of the HIP. Then we need to publish the HIP. Then the community will say they'll throw up all over it again, and we'll have to rewrite it a couple of times. Then with all that in mind, we'll need to implement the contracts on chain for doing the rewards. So I feel that this is the long pole. By the time that part is done, we'll hopefully have ironed out sufficient number of bugs in the mapper that it's pretty usable. I mean, it's probably not going to be an Apple iPhone at that point, but I think it's going to be sufficiently robust for the crowd that we anticipate, actually using it.
So that sounded like 2 to 3 months, and they're in people's hands, running what, hundreds, or all 2,000 of the first batch.
So we can't sell them. We can't disperse them outside of just a handful of friends and family that some of them, some of you I know have them, until the the Solana migration is complete, is my point. And throughout that period, we're going to be, basically fixing bugs like the one that you've mentioned. So my point is that we should be ready to push out and publicly make available the batch of the 2,000 mappers by the time, the Solana migration is finished. That's how I would like to see it happen anyway.
Okay, so a month. You're saying you expect it to be in people's hands in a month.
I'm
Sending them
so
out in a month or so.
I'm saying that in terms of getting the mapper finickiness out of the way to the point where we could send them out, it's a month. But then if Solana migration is not complete by then we can't send them out.
Gotcha.
Makes sense. Well, taking that all the way around, I'm going to have to agree with Brainstormer. I think you reward for just model hexes for now, and I don't believe there should be a limit on how many you can grab. Maybe a limit on per radio, but overall, I think you'd like to identify the crazy people who are willing to go do other radios, contrary to Max's very good point that no one's going to be motivated to do anybody else's radio.
We already have 2 caps on the limit. 2 caps for limiting the radios mappers earning. But we don't need a threshold, I think.
Well, sure. I mean, like I said, I've never had a super strong opinion on it. We can remove a threshold. One thing also to consider that is very important in the topic of having a threshold or not having threshold is the discovery mapping part of it, which is going to be doled out of the same pool, effectively out of the same 20% pool. And the discovery mapping can be done with a phone that's capable of location sharing. So part of the reason why I think one of the arguments for having the cap is to preclude the situation where, for whatever weird reason, discovery mapping is there, but the spot mappers, we have like a limited number in people's hands, and you have like 1,000 people that have opted in to do discovery mapping, and they just like suddenly like swallow up a whole bunch of rewards for basically doing nothing, for like saying like I'm sharing my location. And although you only get like 30 reward points per day for it, per the hip, you know, if there's like only limited number of people that are subscribers that are just doing the discovery mapping, but the spots are not there to basically even like compete for rewards, or there's like few spots and many discovery mappers, then the discovery mappers can get outsized rewards for just basically enabling the location sharing on their phone.
Why is that offensive?
Well, is like I
Well,
said,
I'm envisioning this thing where people like, oh, what's going on? Like, you know, I want to do the spot thing and whatever. Like, I'm waiting for my spot. And all these people enable location sharing on their phone. They're getting the rewards, and I want to be getting the rewards or some. I don't know. But you know, like, I'm kind of, like I said, I'm not very strong on it. If you guys feel strongly that we should just remove the cap, it's actually like less work.
well, is it,
Or at least maybe not do the cap until we've gotten a larger test batch. Because I could just see where you're coming from. You definitely don't want to make it to where the mappers are making more than the people that have the radios when there's a larger fiscal investment in the radios, at least per setup, right?
I mean, like, having the cap allows us to not worry about anything, any like outcries in the community related to, like, you know, I got mine first, I got mine second, I had to wait, I lost out on all the rewards, blah blah blah. Like, we just clean out the situation with like a handful of people just getting like outsized rewards in the beginning. So on one, so if we do ship all 2,000 right away, which I expect like we will do, I agree that it's a bit of a moot point. But like, you know, things in life usually don't happen according to plan, right? So like, maybe
Sounds
we'll
like that's
ship
from
them, and
experience.
half of them will be broken or something like
I
that.
got caught
Or
up
we'll
in custom.
update them with like some update, and like half of them will get bricked or something, and then some people will be like, oh, and then like you'll have like, you know, so like, so to not have to worry about any of that, we just say, okay, well, like, there is a certain threshold, so until there is some critical mass, like, don't worry about it. Like, whatever we're not planning for, we don't need to worry about. But you know, again, I can't really make a very credible argument to not remove the altogether, because I don't know what could happen, right? Technically, if we ship all 2,000 at the same time, and it's roughly around the same time when the discovery mapping becomes available, which is the plan, I do agree that having the cap is a bit of a point.
Yeah, I think the cap is just creating a long-term addition to this that has, like, solves a short-term problem that otherwise would just get solved by more mappers being out there. So if there really is that many outsized, like that outsized rewards going to mappers, like people will just buy more mappers, and they're not that expensive. That like, it'll work itself out in the market relatively quickly.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess
I
Okay,
agree with
then
Do we know what the price is going to be?
I'm sorry?
I agree with Max's point that the market will work itself out, but I'd like to know what the price range for the mapper will be.
I think it's something like $400 or something like this, $350 or $400. That was the number that was floated before. That's going to be the ballpark.
I think it's questionable in this market if all 2000 sell out that quickly. So I think we definitely don't want to cap it because we want to reward the people who buy them first. I really don't think at that price that many people are going to buy them. I could be completely wrong, but that seems
Yeah.
high.
Okay, let's remove the rewards. I'm on board with it.
A question
Rewards
I have:
gone.
are we still only for the rewards discovery mapping? Is it Helium subscribers only?
I mean, the short and blunt of it is yes, because there is no other service providers on the network. So Helium subscribers only, although it's not limited to like only Helium subscribers. Any service provider, so technically, I think GigSky subscribers as well, but that's about it. So like it has to be somebody who is using the network. That's kind of the point of it.
So the phones can't peripherally scan band 48 for our radios? Is that what's happening?
The phones can scan, but the discovery mapping is not about scanning. It's about basically, so the idea behind discovery mapping is as follows. Like I would argue like the most important thing that needs to happen on the network soon is we need to start providing very sort of clear feedback, clear guidance through the POC system on where the coverage should be created. That coverage should be created in places where the network is most likely to carry the most data. Now, the point behind the discovery mapping is that the subscribers, the active subscribers on the network, in this case, the Helium mobile subscribers, opt in to share the location of their basically phone continuously. And on the back end, we can look then at the location, like the history of the location, and the history of data usage. And we can see like, okay, in this place, this phone, the person was whatever, sitting at a cafe and at the same time watching Netflix, and they've swallowed up a lot of TMO data. And we can uncover these patterns where basically we can see how much TMO data is being used on the back end, and we can see the location of the UE. And using those two inputs, we can see what is the optimal set of hexes where if the coverage is placed, it will immediately result in maximum offload and a maximum data flow to the network. So that is the point, the whole point of the discovery mapping. It will allow us to move away from, basically like the current paradigm of, where do you place radios? That is like, put them anywhere where there's a lot of slow moving people, to being a lot more precise, whereby the hexes that are, basically we see are likely to get a lot of data can be boosted by us to increase the rewards.
Yeah, so another interesting thing on that, even if there's a scenario where the discovery mapping gets an outsized portion of the rewards, that means that there's so many people subscribing to Helium Mobile that other MVNOs will take notice that why is this new startup MVNO getting so many subscribers so quickly? Oh, it's because separate from us, and we don't have to deal with the crypto side of it, our customers could potentially be earning crypto just by going around connecting to these radios. Like, awesome, where do we sign up? That's the thing that we don't have to deal with. We don't have to deal with any of the crypto stuff because it's all coming from this 20% bucket. And now people will want to sign up with us over someone else, like that
Right.
could be something that's valuable. It could also not
Right,
play
no,
out that way,
absolutely.
but it could be something of value. So I don't think we need to worry too much about situations where there's outsized rewards. Like I think we need to sit back and look after everything's deployed and see if the outsized rewards are not creating good results. But just because you're inefficient, like I really think that's one of the values of using a token for these things is you can sometimes be inefficient and still get the result you want. And even though it's like slightly more expensive, you're still spending the same number of tokens either way. So, you have that freedom to be a little inefficient.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think that we can put the problem of capping the rewards to bed, and just say that we don't have a cap for the mapping rewards, and just see what happens. Kind of YOLO it.
And then on some of the willy-nilly stuff, like I know your preference is 0, but what if it was like 1% of a hex that you earn 1% of what earning validation would earn. So you're still not earning very much for mapping, but you are earning something. And then once we fold in the piece of like where we think the edges of coverage are, we can then raise the value of some of those hexes that we want to get mapped. That would be like a phase 2 though.
Sure.
Kind of like surge areas.
Well, I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, we can think about something like that.
Yeah, would you only need like so once I guess when we bring back like say the eSIMs for example, would that be all you would need in order to start being able to opt in for that, or would you have to actually have a full like Freedom Fi SIM or actually be signed up for Helium Mobile?
Are you referring to the discovery mapping
Yes.
in your question? You would need to be using a non-Helium 5G network in parallel to the Helium 5G network. So, because if you're not using another network and you're just sharing the location, we don't know, like, where you're using a lot of data in that other network. Hence, it's not useful because, like, you're just sharing the location where you're using our network. Like, okay, we know that anyway because you're connected to the cell.
Okay. And I guess my other question is, what is this going to look like in terms of... So when you sign up for Discovery, is that just going to be like it's going to prompt you to say, hey, do you want to opt into this? Is that going to be like a separate program where it's like, hey, since you've joined Helium Mobile, here's you want to sign up for this? Or I guess I'm trying to understand where's...
Yeah, so it's like a generic app that can be adopted by any operator. Like GigSky could use it, Helium Mobile can use it, any other operator that signs up to use the network can either incorporate into their native carrier app or build it as a separate app. But it's going to be basically like this piece of open code that effectively, in case of Helium Mobile, it's going to be literally like incorporated into the Helium Mobile app. It's like a tab where first it has instructions on what you need to do to enable permanent location sharing. And it's actually like, harder than one would imagine. Like most phones don't allow you to just like push a button and enable continuous location sharing. you can share it like while the app's open type thing. But like if you want the app to share the location continuously, you actually have to go to settings and then do some stuff. So there's basically like instruction flow on what you need to do on the phone to enable continuous location sharing. And in case of the Helium mobile app, you will basically see if like there's going to be like a toggle section. You go in there, it says okay, your discovery mapping mode is on, and basically this is the history of the rewards that you have gotten for the discovery mapping. That's basically what it is. It's like an app that can be easily adopted to any service provider. In case of Helium mobile, it's embedded into the like Helium mobile app that does all kinds of stuff that manages your plan, but also allows you to toggle basically the discovery mapping on and off, and gives you some statistics about what it is.
Cool. I think that's that sounds awesome.
Yeah, I'm pretty enthusiastic about that as well. I mean, more importantly, I think that this will. We have another kind of like hip in the works that is related to it. That actually makes the whole thing relevant, which basically is about allowing service providers to like boost certain hexes. To stake mobile to hexes and then boost certain hexes. And the point is that, informed by the discovery mapping data, the service providers will be able to stake mobile to certain like locations where they feel that like there's going to be like the best opportunity for offloading the most data. And people that placed coverage in those locations will get higher proportion of rewards than just people that are covering the ocean or whatever. And there's a control mechanism in that if you're a service provider and you staked some mobile to an area that you said basically based on the discovery mapping is the priority area for you, yet you have not sent any data to that location within a given period of time, then the mobile you staked gets burned. So that there's like a feedback mechanism such that you don't have a situation where all service providers just take all their mobile like willy-nilly all over the place, but then don't send any data anywhere. So it almost creates this concept of what I describe as like a usage-aware coverage, where like we as a Helium Mobile as a service provider, we can like spend marketing dollars to promote subscribers and get subscribers in certain areas, and then based on what our subscriber pattern looks like where they are and what their usage pattern is, the rewards for coverage will automatically kind of trail that and adjust to maximize basically data flow into the network, which is really like the biggest problem that we're trying to solve for.
Taking that one step farther, how do you control, or is it even possible, of you say, we need this area covered, and then too many of us radio operators make all the long, sort of expensive plans to find locations to put radios in those that area that you're rewarding, and then suddenly there's a glut because we're not all communicating with each other to tell plans, and certainly I can't throw out information to stop Max from going in there, but we don't want everyone going in there.
Well, we are about to publish a HIP about it, and we can discuss it.
Okay.
So this is one of the there's going to be this and multiple other points. No, I mean it's a valid is it the capture the hex type of play? And if it is, then how do you resolve for the situation where like 3 people have already purchased radios and then like somebody captured before? Like there has to be some like mechanism for it. And I think it's like this and probably a whole bunch of other discussions we should have following the publication of the service provider hex boosting HIP.
I'm happy enough to hear that you're thinking of it. That's all. Thanks.
All right, so we're at the top of the hour. Then I think that to summarize, we'll take the next steps to start drafting the mappers sub-DAO HIP. We will update the current HIP and kind of point to the mapper sub-DAO as a potential next step in it. Yet adopt the rewards for verification and discovery mapping. We'll remove the cap. And that is it. That's kind of my notes for the session. Anything I'm missing?
Nope, really good call, guys.
Great. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody.
Good.
So awesome to see that we're making progress on this stuff.
Great.
Talk later.
Alrighty, and also I did record
Good
it.
weekend, guys.
Huh? I was just letting everybody know that we did record it, and I'm going to try to find a way to post it so we can see it. But great call, guys. Really appreciate it. And I guess our next meeting will be Tuesday, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, shoot for Tuesday. All right. Thanks, everyone.